So, shall watch it. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this panel sharing values through inclusion and diversity. And I have here 4 stars, 4 people who have a lot of experience, different experiences. And I would like to start by thanking the organizers of FIS, the Health Innovation Forum, by Josie Vilar and the entire team, for offering this opportunity for us to share ideas in the current scenario where diversity and inclusion policies are not just part of the debate, but part of the solutions and practices in corporate events and outside them. And I think that to all of us, it's a great responsibility due to the leadership that each one of us, of each of our guest speakers have in their careers and in professional lives, to share their ideas, dilemmas, findings, to share with everyone watching us here. I would like to start by telling a little bit of our experience. So here I direct 2 equipments in Brazil, Passo do Frevo in Recife and the Museum of Tomorrow in Rio de Janeiro. 7 years in Recife and 6 years in Rio. And this has been a very rich sharing and something that started with the beginning of these museums. It's the good contact and good relationships. The 2 museums we work here, more specifically here in the Museum of Tomorrow, sustainability and relationships, how to improve our relationships today so that we have better tomorrows. So this relationship between inclusion by diversity has been the keystone ever since the building or the construction of this museum. And I would say that this construction is collective and it has been very rich since the experience we gained and a contact with different realities, with different problems, but also to put in a DNA of our organization and our management, diversity as an asset of our management and the experience that we can offer for anyone who gets in touch with us. And just on a side note, in this process of construction, we needed to find some renowned people who could make the difference in this mission. So one of them is Luana Génot. She's here. And since the beginning of the year, she's our curator for inclusion and diversity, and she's helping us to strengthen the agenda. It's a very rich agenda, as I was saying. We also have in our program the role of bringing regular agendas, regular programs that we open for debate. And we say that ours is the house or the home of dialogue. And after the tragedy of the pandemic, we have found opportunities of reaching a different audience, of taking this experience to people's homes. And it was really great last year when in a few weeks you could turn a page and put the whole debate and contents available to everybody at home. And then we tried to overcome the difficulties of the social isolation and taking science-based contents, showing that science is increasingly more important in the definitions and narratives that we need to seek in the current scenario, and especially during the pandemic. As part of these activities, we have programs dedicated to the issue of African-based communities, and then we have partnerships with the UNCR to know more about refugees and also LGBTQA plus communities, to bring all of this to our coexistence, to our experiences, where the gender issue is addressed all the times today. More than 60% of the leaders of IDG are women. We have 15% representatives from LGBTQA IA plus, and in the port region, the port is neighboring to the museum. We have hired people from this region, and everything. We had a reduction in visits due to the pandemic, but we have many projects dedicated to women in science, any evidence from Black cultures. So all of this, we think this is an opportunity for debate, and visitors inside and outside the museum taking high quality content. So this is an opportunity. And as we said this morning in the live, this is a very rich experience for all of us. And this is a sharing of experience. And we try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes to understand better the dilemmas and the difficulties and the solutions that they find. So, after this introduction, I would like to, and then we have 10 minutes each one, for each one to share your personal experience, your professional experience, regarding the practice of inclusion and diversity in your lives, and how your experience has been in terms of trying to mitigate these difficulties and to turn words into practice. Um, so once again, I would like to thank you for the opportunity of FIS to bringing us all together here, and the opportunity of being with you, and for us to share in the best way possible the time that we've been given. So first of all, I would like to put in the order, maybe first give the floor to Jeane Tsutsui, CEO of Grupo Fleury. And it's a pleasure to meet you again. We have recently met, and in terms of how we should interact the experience between Grupo Fleury and the Museum of Tomorrow. It's a pleasure to have you here. And as I said, Jeane, she has a degree in medicine, the School of Medicine of the University of São Paulo, specialized in cardiology with a PhD and postdoc at Nebraska University. And she's a full professor of the School of University of the University of São Paulo. She also has an MBA in innovation, and she's been to Wharton and also to MIT. Jeane today is in charge or runs Grupo Fleury. She's the CEO of Grupo Fleury. You're most welcome, Jeane. Thank you all very much. I would like to thank everyone who's here. I would also like to thank the organizers of this, to praise you for the initiative, and to say that I'm very happy to be here to share my experiences with you, with people who have different experiences. This is all very nice. And just to warm up our conversation, I would like to share my experience with you in the area of health, in the health industry. But looking at a company that has been working diagnostic medicine for a long time in Brazil, which is to make diversity, to really implement it. And this has provided so much richness in terms of the work of different locations. And today we have units from the northernmost part of the country to the south. So in a long time, as we added more diverse populations, we have had more ideas in the health industry, but our practice ends up being local. One interesting aspect is this. Another interesting aspect that I would like to mention is that for many years we've been working with social uh, responsibility, diversity, and ESG. And working in the health industry, 80% of all our workers, we are about 1,200 employees, 80% women. But we also work on the role of women in leadership. 67% of the women in 67% of the leadership positions are taken by women. And I have taken over as CEO of the company in April this year, and also in our board of directors, we have 20% women. Um, why am I mentioning this? In the health industry, where today we have predominantly women in the health industry, it's different. In the past, when I was in a medical school, we were about 30%. Today, women are the majority in health. And as I said, our company represents that greatly. The strength of women accounting for 80% of the total number of employees, and the fact that there are more women in science and technology, engineering and mathematics. Here we have 74% occupying those positions. And I think this is something important. And then we talked about geographical diversity, gender, LGBTQIA plus, ethnic. So we are working on many fronts. And as you said, what are the challenges that we have? Especially when we look at our numbers, and we are aware that there is a major challenge lying ahead of us in many aspects. Maybe one reflection is, what is the importance of all this diversity? We can very clearly see the challenge that we have in terms of being more innovative and having a vision with more flexibility, or working with the uncertain. I think that the pandemic has showed to us this challenge of us not knowing where to go, and that also that we need more innovation and diverse thoughts, and this is fundamental for organizations to succeed. And it's also very important for us to emphasize diversity of thoughts, opinions in all its aspects, because first of all, this is a driver of innovation. And it also prepares organizations to deal with uncertainties that we have today. And of course, we also have a major challenge and a need to give back to society everything that organizations have been building. And then I would like to mention a few aspects we've been working on the theme of social impact. And a company operating in the health industry, we have a major challenge internally for us to build more actions with a social impact. Recently, we also issued debentures, and one of the goals in our commitments as an organization was to increase diversity, and also to have customers from classes C and D using different services. So this is the type of vision we in an organization must have it. And how we bring inclusion, diversity, and this is a driver of innovation, growth, and this is a driver of return to society. And the thing is how we can go across this cycle. So it's not easy to have the strategic vision a long time. And what I usually say is that all of this is a journey, meaning we cannot all of a sudden build everything from scratch. You need to include that right from the vision of the leadership, that you are sure of its importance, everything that we are saying, and that really permeates the organization, because this is a matter of culture of diversity, culture of inclusion, culture of social impact. And we can't change the organization just overnight. So we have been working with these themes, with women in leadership, with diversity groups, taking this more and more to the day-to-day of people. And a long time we have been positioning ourselves in a way in order to gain more and more space. So yes, this is a journey, as I said, that we've been going on for many years, and for sure still have a lot to grow, especially right now. So when we're talking a lot about this is very important, and it gives us a very good energy to be here sharing experiences. And I think that this should permeate the entire organization. It's not enough for this to be just on in the words, but this needs to be part of the day-to-day lives of people. We need to experience this and know the importance of all of this for and bring this issue to different forums of debate, capturing our experiences so that this is part of the day-to-day life of the organization. These are my initial thoughts, and I would like to stress that I have a vision that I think we still have a lot to build, but I feel that organizations are more and more seeing the importance of this. Even companies like us, we are a publicly traded company, and the capitals market has been talking about the importance of these themes at all levels of society, and we see this in a way that is very present. And again, well, we still have a long way to go, but I'm optimistic. Ricardo, this is all I wanted to say as my opening remarks. And I would like to hear now other experiences.
Thank you very much, Jeane. Seeing you as a woman leading such a huge organization that provides services to so many people across its many units, across its many labs. And I believe that this wealth of diversity helps boost the company's businesses, but also to improve the customer service, because this diversity is also seen in the base of clients that use your lab services in Brazil. So your comments were very important. This is an ongoing collective process, of course, but for a company as big as Fleury, it has to be a top-down decision by defining values, and that's got to be done by leaders till it trickles down to the entire organization. So thank you very much. And moving forward, I would like to invite Ricardo Salles to talk about his experience. He's a co-founder of Mais Diversidade. He's a consultant and an advisor. He graduated at the University of São Paulo, where he did his master's about diversity of organizations. He has worked for major companies, and he's currently the counselor for the diversity committee of Itaú Bank, and he was chosen as one of the most influential Brazilians in this subject. So we have a specialist with us. So what was it like for you to evolve in your career, and how do you see the strategic importance of this agenda that, of course, it's one of the biggest liabilities of society, and it has to be expedited. So you have the floor, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo, for the kind introduction. I want to congratulate the FIS organizers on such a great event. And what we're talking about has every connection to the healthcare aspects, which also involve diversity and inclusion. Hello, Jeane, Luana, Sérgio. I admire you, and I also root for you. I was really thrilled when she was announced as a leader at Fleury, as well as the accomplishments of Jeane and Sérgio, because to talk about diversity is equivalent to thinking about how collectively the most different sectors can support themselves. Well, I've been working with the system since 2005, and I used to say that working with systems is the same as talking about ourselves. When I started my career, my main issue back then was related to my sexual orientation, and asking why the fact of being gay would be, and it was, a problem at the workplace. And I tell my personal story to take a leap forward and talk about the current moment. We advanced, Ricardo. That goes back to your first comment. We did advance a lot, but at the same time, we didn't advance enough, and we haven't even come close to where we would have to be. But we must consider that the last decade was a decade with a very significant progress in this agenda of organizations. Our colleagues are here with us. Our fellow panelists have long experiences. So there's, of course, 5 or 10 years ago, this was not a top of mind item in the agendas of companies, but changes did happen. We have to celebrate them, but at the same time, we have to highlight that they still happen at a speed that is below what we need them to be at. And I've been thinking of 2020 as a year of change in this agenda. 2020 was a year when everything changed in several aspects, and this has a significant impact on the agenda. If until 2019, the question that likely Luana or myself and other advisors had to answer at companies was, why should we even go there? Why should we discuss this subject? And we had to explain our ideas and advocate for them. But now the question is different. The question is we get asked is, please help me. How do I advance from here? And why did that question change? Well, because last year there were significant changes that have had an impact on this agenda. The first one is very well known to all of us, the pandemic, which in addition to its impact on health, leaves us with a huge economic impact, and also in terms of more accentuated inequalities. Before the pandemic, Brazil had a 46.9% of its income in the hands of the wealthiest 1%. After the pandemic, the wealth concentration moved to 49.9%. Almost 50% of what's produced in the country is concentrated at the hands of the wealthiest 1%. During the pandemic, we also saw that this speech of we're all the same cannot be sustained, because if on the one hand, ethically speaking, of course, we are the same, but society tears us down in terms of differences and access to opportunities. And that became evident during the pandemic when, for instance, the rate of death among Black people is much higher than among white people due to access to healthcare systems, the possibility of maintaining social distancing, in addition to several other things. The pandemic was a watershed, as well as another fact, historical facts that just as with other historical facts that were probably not distant enough from it to be able to analyze it, which is the murder of George Floyd. And history is like that, you know, you need to take a distance from it and stand a bit away from it to be able to analyze it. But of course, I can already say that the murder of George Floyd was a striking moment for that decade and for this decade. And even in Brazil, the discussion advanced a lot in the last few years. Brazil went from a country where up until 2019, many people said that there was no such thing as racism here, and to a country that now maybe in a hurry, many people are saying that they're anti-racist without actually discussing that in depth. But the fact is, the death of George Floyd as a historical fact puts pressure on the companies and business companies in North America, and by extension throughout the world, Brazil included, leaving greater pressure about what companies will do in terms of that agenda. And I want to add something to what Jeane said, which is the ESG agenda. This is not something new. This has been around for a while, but now we've been talking about it in greater depth. ESG, just as a reminder, is the acronym that stands for the environmental, social, and governance-related concerns of a company. Since last year, it has taken on an unheard of protagonism. The ESG as a subject is now being discussed by the boards of directors and large companies, as is the case, for instance, of the Fleury labs and Suzano and others, have been issuing bonds, as Jeane mentioned, capturing funds from the market with goals attached to ESG. And that is an interesting change. Our subject matter, equality and inclusion, is probably the only subject that is seen across all three initials in this ESG acronym, because it is in the environmental perspective. When we talk about climate justice and the impact on the most vulnerable populations suffered due to global warming, it is also in the G when it comes to ethics, transparency, diversity at the boards, and it's also, of course, represented by the S when we talk about the societal demands. The subject is extremely important, but what is our challenge now? Well, it's several different challenges. We're in a country with statistics that are probably very well known to all of us, a country with 51% of women, but they only represent 13% of leadership positions, with the Black majority, with only 4.7% of Black people in leadership positions in companies, a country with millions of LGBTQIA plus people that leads the violence ranking, and a country that during the pandemic, and that's something that we have to look at very attentively, millions of people with disabilities lost their jobs, and this is due to the impact of measures of not looking more closely at the lack of public policies, but it's also due to something that we must be very aware of, which is the impact of new technologies and automation. And this has gained a lot of speed during the pandemic, and it led many companies to simply phase out overnight hundreds of thousands of job positions considered to be operational. These positions had been historically occupied by Black people with a lower educational level, with mothers that would work part-time, that were the main victims of unemployment during the pandemic. And in conclusion, I believe that our biggest challenge right now is to create an agenda that I see as a Brazilian-esque ESG agenda. Brazil is habitually imports agendas from abroad and brings them into our context without any type of adjustments. This occurred with sustainability back in the 1990s. It also happened with diversity in the beginning of the 2000s, when we would access the website of some companies and you would see, well, we value diversity. And there was a picture of what diversity was about. And that picture showed only the North American stereotypes. I saw that a lot back in the beginning of the 2000s, or a photo showing somebody in Hawaii or an indigenous person, totally out of sync with Brazil's reality. And I think that now we have to talk about what it means to talk about ESG in Brazil, because when it comes to the environmental aspect of ESG for environmental development, there's huge challenges. COP26 will end tomorrow, and Brazil unfortunately had no significant contribution in that discussion. Our decarbonization challenge is totally different vis-a-vis that of other countries. 80% of the electricity produced in Brazil is already clean. Our main challenge right now is especially reducing or totally eliminating deforestation in the Amazon and giving special attention to infrastructure and electricity infrastructure constructions and so forth. Brazilianized ESG agenda, as it were, should dedicate itself to the social aspects of things. And in that regard, Brazil has two inescapable issues. The first of which is social inequality, and secondly, fighting structural racism. I believe these are subjects that Luana and Sérgio, they certainly can share a lot about with us. And this is the end of my initial statements. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo. Your comments were very clear. And as a consultant, it's always important to talk about that in a structured manner with concrete data. And sometimes we think that we understand what's going on. And when we look at the numbers, they're shocking. And I say that when you say that 47% is now 49.9% of the wealth is at the hands of 1% of the population. And that's shocking to hear. And maybe the most prominent feature of inequality in the biggest economies of the world. And that's one thing that needs to be looked at as a societal project by the entire country, and not as a project of this or that administration. As long as that's not solved, we're going to see chronic problems in security and safety and in terms of sustainable life, as you put very well. And concerning this initiative, Ricardo, I want to mention that here we had an exhibit about the pandemic, and the pandemic has this attached phenomenon, which is the syndemic. The tragedies can cause an increase in inequality when the wealthy become wealthier and the poor become poorer due to the inequality of access. And on the other hand, ease of access to everything that protects that specific group in society. So this syndemic has to be studied. And in history, in a few years from now, we're going to see the concrete effects of that. And of course, immediately, we're going to see that in the crisis and in the exodus and from schools by most of the poor population that had no access to tele-education. And that's something that we're going to feel 10 or 15 years from now, with a huge gap in the education of these youths in this 2-year period. This will be an important aspect to be discussed by the governance. Next year, we're going to have general elections, and all of these aspects need to be taken into account. So I think this is important information, and we have to work very passionately and actively if we want to change the scenario in a short period of time. And now, with that, I'd like to invite my dear friend and partner, Luana, to share her experience. And I want to say that Luana, very early on, she embraced the agenda of tomorrow, because she already worked with Better Tomorrows at her institution. And I'm going to read her short bio, but if I read it entirely, it's going to take me 10 minutes. So I'm just going to read it partially. Luana is the founder and executive director for the Identidades do Brasil Institute. She has a master's in ethnical racial relations from Cefet. She is an author, and she writes for a major newspaper in Brazil. She's our curator and curator of the scientific committee of Lourdes at the Tomorrow Museum. She's a presenter at GNT TV channel, and she graduated from the Catholic University of Rio in marketing. Actually, she worked at the BMW Foundation, and it was through her that we made the first contact with them. Our directors also participate in some initiatives related to that. She got the scholar from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, where she specialized in race, ethnicity, and media research. She worked for Publicis Chicago in strategy. She was a volunteer in Obama's campaign, and I think that that's why Barack Obama was elected, and she worked in the marketing sector of multinational companies. She was also a model, and she was a speaker in Brazil, France, the US, curator of events. She was a manager of projects on ethnicity, equity, diversity, and many other things, co-leader in the Committee of Racial Equality, and so on and so forth, right, Luana? So over to you, and please share your experience and your perspective about the current reality as you see it.
Thank you very much for the kindness in reading my mini bio, and for the love that you have, and what we have shared once we travel our journey together at the Museum of Tomorrow, where I am a curator too. I'm very glad to be sharing this panel with Sérgio and Raquel and Jeane, and with this agenda of diversity and inclusion. I am at the airport, so you will probably hear last call and stuff like that. And I would like to tell you why. Well, this is November. So usually in November, companies remember that we need to talk about diversity and racial equality. So, and this is very good, but I'm always rushing. But the first invitation to talk about anti-racist agenda, not just in November. And then you talked about the challenges. And these are agenda that are very important. We're never talking about favor or charity. We're talking about something that will provide socioeconomic performance to the country. And I really agree with everything that has been said by Jeane and Ricardo. We are talking about a journey. It's not something that specific. So it's a journey that the companies may travel. And when you talk to me about this, well, I would just say I'm in a hurry. When people say that the impacts that we are going to see is for future generations, I say, no, no way. I want to see this while I'm still alive. I want to have more than 200 million in the country. More than 50% of 200 million are Black or mixed people. And it's only fair that these 50 million people, or these 50%, 120 million people, also had the opportunity of holding executive positions in the largest companies in the country. According to statistics today, I can see that of the top 500 companies, less than 5% have Black people in leadership positions, and less than 1% has a Black woman like myself running a big company. And this needs to change because, as I say, if Brazil wants to grow, there is no plane that can fly with just one wing. So if more than 50% of the population cannot have access to leadership positions, having better salaries, the country will not grow. It's a very simple calculation. It needs to be part of the strategy of companies so that they grow. Uh, well, I would also like to share something personal with you, especially when we're talking about health. My mother is a nursing technician, and she's part of a significant group of Black people in healthcare that hold the lowest positions in the healthcare, Black or mixed people. And what we still see is studying the health industry, not just in Brazil, but in some parts of the world, is that non-white people, and especially Black people, both in the US and in Brazil, are 20%, less than 20% of those chairing or leading healthcare organizations. So our challenge, especially in the healthcare industry, is to make the statistics, which is inflated by numbers coming from the basis, going up to higher positions, to the boards of those companies, to hospitals, especially because those companies may also be included in schools of medicine so that we have a proportional representativity to use the talents of the Black population here too. A second point, which is a challenge, are clinical tests. Every year, I do benchmark in some parts of the world in the lack of diversity and inclusion. Um, Before the pandemic, I have gone to the US, visited some healthcare companies there. And what I found is that one of the practices, something I consider a good practice that they were implementing, were clinical tests directed to the Black population so that we had more medications tested on Black people so that we can identify potential diseases and potential issues that are unique to this group. Um, it's something that is kind of arguable. I'm not saying a truth, but it's a concern that the needs of those groups. I took part in a discussion yesterday, and I talked about Leah Schuckman, and then she said something that I found very opportune to bring into the debate in talking about health. Here in Brazil, right when we started the lockdown and everything, and even vaccination, the priority was the older population. And this is a global protocol of the World Health Organization, and it's very good, very valid. Now, if we practiced our Brazilian ESG, we also consider right from the beginning how you deal with that in terms of race. So the Black population lives less. We should also divide by race the possibility of giving to Black people the possibility of having vaccinated before. This is a possible way of addressing our sanitary issues, because what I'm saying here, they are just discussions for us to understand that the unique features of a country that has such a dense Black population like Brazil cannot go unnoticed, as if we are going to copy paste from the US or global protocols. We need to be affirmative. We need to understand that we have a country that has a majority of Black people, and being Black in Brazil is usually means being at the margin and vulnerable in terms of access to healthcare. So we need to consider the data to be able to define policies in a public or private sectors addressing our problems, both with regards of with what you said before, the absence of Black physicians wherever in any healthcare agency where we go. It's not absence, because there are some Black doctors, but there are very few. We need more direct incentives so that we could have more Black and indigenous physicians to address issues and problems that are not being addressed. And I mentioned the clinical tests, also considering the unique features and the health difficulties that the Black population, because of lack of access and to good quality health facilities. And this is something that is unique to the Black population. They have a higher rate of hypertension and some diseases because there is no good quality and diet, and also because of history, you know that the Black population were slaves in Brazil and they were feeding on leftovers, and this went from generation after generation. So higher consumption of salt, and the health of this population needs to be seen with a specific lens, and this needs to be addressed. It's impossible to close your eyes to this, and this is in this event, this is healthcare. I'm just mentioning it. I'm not an expert in healthcare. The experts are here on the panel, Dr. Jeane, but this is just a challenge and an invitation. Just as Ricardo said, I would like to celebrate the advances, but I think that we can go much faster and advance even further. For example, all the advances that have already happened for the gender is very important. It's very important to have more women, um, and this is very positive and a major advance. But we also need to open more possibilities for the Black population to get there, um, in healthcare and outside healthcare. So this is an invitation for you. It's an area where you need to mobilize more. There's a significant number of people. Oftentimes it is the area of care. It's the gateway for the Black population. But we still have some frailties in this industry that prevent population to go even higher. And then all these public health issues that we need to have a look considering race. So this is all I had to say. If you want to follow the work I do, it's www.simigualdaderacial.com.br. Thank you very much. Wow, Luana, you speak so fast. And you say so many things that we need to talk about. Luana, I'm going to say something to you that is urgency, uh, and added to that, because sometimes this haste or this urgency, it has a diffuse meaning for many people. And this urgency, whenever we say that tomorrow depends on today and we need today to have better tomorrows, this is the haste. We need to make these decisions. I can give you a very brief example of the Museum of Tomorrow. We had a partnership with the UN HCR, and then the debate here with the Ministry of Justice in terms of regularizing their situation. So this was a refugee, and we wanted to make his status regular, and he had difficulties, his wife and children, and he wants to bring them from abroad to here. And the high-ranking officer in the Ministry of Justice, he says, sure that will solve your problem in the next 2 years. 2 years? Well, it doesn't translate the haste and the urgency. So the understanding, well, 2 years for a bureaucrat is very fast. But if your wife and your children are far away and you cannot enjoy their company, it's too long. I would like to talk more about haste. We need to relate, but to push the haste button or the urgency button after the pandemic. So people are leaving schools, they are no longer at schools. We need to make an extra effort to take all the children back to school, to a new reality which hasn't been written yet, and all the consequences that ESG should be customized or Brazilianized. And I used to work well, you change acronyms, they come and go. But what we need to do is to really know what we are doing and the difference we make. the acronym works very well in some countries. It needs to be regulated for us to be able to assess where companies are effectively implementing their ESG policies. Some are certainly doing it very seriously, most of them, but others aren't. We need to pay attention at that. And within this aspect, we've been working very much at the museum with projects that are specific to open doors. The Frevo Negro in Recife, and here, evidências of Black culture. And everything that we do in terms of culture, we received an award in London for the best culture organization in terms of soft power in the world, in our capacity of conversing with this capacity. I would like to report the experience of trends that we have hired to work here in customer relationship, and it was a huge challenge. And if they weren't here, we wouldn't know. They wanted to change their social name in their health plan card. And at the time, the health plan didn't allow, and then we were able to do it. And apparently, it is something very simple, and it was very important for them. And they were just asking to change their social name so that it would be agree with their looks and reduce the embarrassments that they were going through. So it may sound like minor things, but they just translate this haste or this urgency that will make a difference in people's lives. And my last part, I would like to invite Sérgio from Conta Black to share his experience with us, any inspiration, and what they told you when they denied you credit. Well, if you don't give me credit, I'm going to give credit to everyone else. This is important to show how motivations, where they come from, how they are born, and how we can transform the scenario. I'm going to read a little bit. Sérgio is the founder and CEO of Conta Black. He is an advisor of agribusiness and also works for Fundação Lemon. And he also dedicated to fostering inclusion and financial education. He's from São Paulo. He's the child of a metal worker and a housemaid. Well, I'm number 2 of number 6. And it's good to have a big family and many brothers and sisters. He's married and he wants to transform all lives in this context. He's an entrepreneur. He started his career in retail and he became an entrepreneur in video games. And he created the first engine for searching games in Brazil for Apple games with a mission of making the platform more popular. He sold his share and he took on the challenge of going on enterprise with EBITs and with an advertising agency. But his connection with the financial market arose from the fact when he needed credit to change equipment and he was denied credit for no reason. So he decided to become his own source of funding. And here he is today to tell us about his experience in the Conta Black and all the challenges that we have talked about here today, and especially the difficulties and the dilemmas and how to transform words in practice. Sérgio.
Hi, Ricardo. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I like to give a self-description for people with visual disabilities. I am a Black man. I am wearing a t-shirt, a black jacket, shaved hair, and I have a board full of tasks behind me. I was only able to fulfill a few, but well, I also want to thank the FIS initiative for the opportunity to be here, sharing the stage with my friends, Ricardo, Jeane, and Luana, and to tell you a bit about my trajectory. I can say that I'm not any different from any Black entrepreneur in this country. I was born in a slum. I am the son of a house servant and a metallurgist, and I lived in a region that I could tell you that I could have become a criminal. But my education, my upbringing was, my parents were always concerned about my future. And my grandmother, she was the child of slaves. She had never had a bank account. I was born in 1974. You can probably understand that I experienced the dictatorship and inflation and unemployment. And my mother would always encourage the construction of futures. And she was always saying that she was not able to have a good education. So she wanted for us, her children, to study. And she was always telling us that we should constantly study to achieve our dreams. And she everything that I said that I wanted to do, she would tell me, yes, you're going to do whatever you want to do. You're going to work in the financial market if you want to. You're going to work for a large company if you want to. So I had the opportunity to work for a department store, my first and only job. And that's when I found out that becoming an entrepreneur was a way for me to achieve freedom. Because if I had become a young director in that company, it would take years. And if I was able to overcome that phase of being a director, probably I wouldn't be able to, because we know that companies don't put diversity into practice. So when I started, when I became an entrepreneur, I saw that it was extremely difficult for a Black young person to be a business owner. I set up a business, and I was harshly criticized for doing so because people thought that I would not have the capacity to do that. But I was able to overcome that hurdle. And when you're an entrepreneur, you know that the obstacles are going to be there, but you have to look into the future and find ways to achieve your goals. When I joined the publicity market, I was the only Black person in a publicity agency with 30 employees. And I was there for over 20 years, building relationships and doing networking. And I saw people looking down at me and wondering, well, are you really an owner of an agency? Sérgio All? Where's that from? From which country? Where's your surname from? So I saw a lot of that, and I found out that I had to do what people used to say back in the time of segregation in the US, that we have to build our own banks, our transportation companies, our TV broadcasting companies. And when I saw it at that speech, that led me to take a much bigger leap and becoming an entrepreneur and showing that getting there is possible. My biggest problem was that my mother gave me 5 steps to follow. For one, she told me, Sergio, you have to be always well dressed, because people can mistake you for a criminal, because I'm a Black person. And she would also say, you have to be aware of everything that's happening around you and be knowledgeable about everything, so that people see you as a cultivated man. Third, study, study, and study. And the fourth step was, she told me, you should take care of your name, because one day you're going to need it. And lastly, you're going to have to face racism. People will doubt your capability, and you have to prove it constantly. So with these 5 commandments, I thought, well, this is a way for me to face those who want to threaten me. And I was the owner of a full service agency, and with I wanted a small investment to improve my agency, and I was denied credit with no reason, because the manager would tell me, well, internally you look great, you have all of the products, and your account looks great. And I thought, well, is that a problem, a legal problem? No, you have nothing legally speaking. So why don't I have access to credit? Well, Sergio, right now you don't have access to credit. Maybe we can talk in maybe 30 days. Then I understood that Black people are always denied credit. And I saw that this process of being unbanked, it interferes in the health of most of our population. I'm talking about a group that decreased from 55 to 34 million, where 16% have no access to banking services, no financial health. And if you have no financial health, you are prone to becoming ill with every type of disease, mental disease, you have no self-esteem. And then you start wondering, well, can there be any diversity in the financial market? Can a bank look at a Black entrepreneur that is apt for credit and not judge them based on his color? So we see that in the system, there are platforms that run analyses and the algorithms are unreal because most of the population that's Black and for the Northeast has credit denied to them. So when I got my credit request denied, then I started wondering how many Sergios like me are out there, or how many people like me can even, and back at that time, the market was dominated by the 5 biggest banks. Many people do not even have a bank account. And they simply offered a savings account to that Black business owner. So that's what I started wondering, and it started dawning on me that, well, 55% of our population, that represents over 55% of the Black population, are business owners, and they're part of the ecosystem. And when I look at a picture today of a rooftop full of cisgender white men, fewer women, and maybe not even one Black person boasting their achievements, the question I'm left is, where is diversity? At a point of my journey as an entrepreneur, as a business person, I went to a deluxe restaurant and I arrived with my white partner and with my imported car, and the waiter asked me, well, are you going to wait for him or are you picking somebody up? I told him, no, I'm here to eat. Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, how are we to build an ESG agenda, which in my opinion is a commodity? If that has not reached the base of the pyramid, the person who is there providing services to me, I think one of the roles of CEOs is that engaged CEOs that are engaged with the ESG and diversity causes, and those that think that they really have to balance out the hiring of Black people to leadership positions. Well, it doesn't have to come only from him or her. They have to prepare an entire chain for that to happen. Or likewise, an investments executive that tells me, well, Sergio, I'm not able to hire Black people. And I tell them, maybe it's not you who are not working hard enough. Maybe it's a problem with your company. So when you start discussing these aspects, you start noticing that our work really has to be more assertive. And this idea of Conta Black, it was created to show the financial market that these 57% of that transaction billions outside of the banking system, and these people that consume 1,700 billion worth of products and services per year, we have to show them that now we have a platform that will cater to the needs of this population and show the entire market the worth of this population, which is the sleeping giant, and that's waking up now. So on the one hand, there were many pain points during this process of becoming a business owner. Many people gave up along the way. Many people, when we cross that imaginary line, they would look at us and ask us, you, a digital bank? How's that possible? Really? Yes, we can. We are capable. We took an important step that will be important for the economy, for ourselves to be able to invest in the upcoming generations or those that will be representing us in politics. So how's that possible? Well, by getting organized. That's what we have to do. And sometimes I say this harshly, but well, unfortunately, when it comes to the macroeconomic context of Brazil, one way for us to show the market that we are really important is by joining hands. If you take just a fraction, 1% of these 1,700,000,000,000 a year that are consumed, not to mention that in slums, they purchase billions per year. If you take just a portion of it, I'm sure that the market of products and consumption will want to chase this mass. And hence the question, well, do you have a diversity program? Do you have a leadership inclusion program? And that's the point where we show the economy that we really matter. And Conta Black is not here to be just one more digital account among a plethora of digital accounts. I think Conta Black is here to strengthen the economy. Conta Black is here to show that financial education is here to show our Black and brown brothers and sisters that there is a possibility for them to be seen as a financial power and for us to start building proximity. Gone are the days where you would sit with your manager to find out the best investment for you. Now they were focusing on achieving goals, but now we want to generate more proximity and become a moving from being a speaker to being a listener. Tell me about your dreams, your perspectives. Do you know what most people tell me? Well, I would like to go to university. I'd like to be a business owner. I would like to see credit not as my enemy. Can you help me? I would also like to give the possibility to my child to have a future, to study and go to university and take on a leadership position in a large company. Sérgio, I would like, and sometimes it has nothing to do with the financial context. It's all about support. And I think that this is only the tip of the iceberg in a macroeconomic context that represents a majority of 120 million Black and brown people in Brazil. And Conta Black has this purpose. And do you know what important step we're taking now? As of 2021, we're going to invest in the education of autonomous investors. People with the dream of operating the financial market that used to see that as a distant reality, a distant dream. Why have we taken on this responsibility? Because yes, we can. And I think that among these challenges of inclusion and diversity, we're already taking our steps. The role of Conta Black is to be a tool for the financial market. It is to serve as a means of connecting with the IBBR, the Museum of Tomorrow, and the diversity agendas that Ricardo brings to companies and connecting them to economic context. And all that affects our health. I lost my mom to cancer because we didn't have financial health. And with no financial health, that affected our entire family. So I think there's a huge challenge. And as a CEO, I really make it a point of hiring diverse people. We have a marketing head that's part of the LGBTQIA plus community that I'm really proud of. I am a communications analyst that is of indigenous descent. So an extremely diverse team. There are people out there that are prepared and skilled to work with us at Conta Black and to show the market that there are no castes when it comes to diversity. What we have is a project of inclusion into this process. And I believe that in the future, not so distant, And as Génot said, I want to be there to witness this change. I want to contribute to the market and show that that's possible. And when I talk about Conta Black, well, I think there is still a long path ahead of us. We don't think of becoming a bank. What we think is we are a financial community made by people for people whose goal is to take financial education and inclusion to financial services, inclusion to digital services, and most importantly, help the construction of financial health and the health of Brazilians.
Great, Sergio. I think that your experience is inspiring for many initiatives, for people to go into ventures, for entrepreneurs to knock down barriers that come up. You dismantled the barriers that you came across. But people need to hear stories like yours so that they can have that drive to start changing the scenario. What you said about the financial system, and here is the invitation, Sergio. We have a sponsor, a bank at the Museum Santander, and we have Itaú at Passo do Frevo. Maybe we should get together to have a good debate here and there about the lessons each one has learned. I think this would be very nice. And once again, this urgency is fundamental for us to see the change. And then later on, we are going to have a debate, and the issues that we are seeing around are credit difficulties. What are the guarantees that you ask? People ask me a lot. The official banks, also with BNDES, they ask for a real collateral guarantee if someone is opening a startup. No. For us to move towards the end of our panel, I've been told that we only have a few minutes. And then you ask a question, which is related to the last thing you said about the difficulty of access to good quality public health. And you have this experience with your mother, and we feel, and this has been the issue of the conversation with Josier as a board member, as a friend, the whole health environment, that we have the privilege of being here and talking about it. And I would ask this question to Jeane, and of course, if anyone has any contributions, but the question from Liana Oliveira is, how can we make healthcare not to be excluded as it is today, with many issues that are also affected by discrimination and prejudice, and discriminations like racism, xenophobia, and many other phobias that today we see in public healthcare. Could you comment on that, please? Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much for the question. This is a very important question. It was really great to hear everyone with all aspects related to health. So the question is, how can we expand access? And there are some things that have become very, very clear and obvious during the pandemic. And when I talk about health, it's very important that we have more and more this look at integral health, whole health. It's not just physical health whenever there is a disease, but mental health, which is super important. And Ricardo mentioned a few aspects, Sergio too. So mental health is a very serious problem that we are dealing with today. Not everyone is paying attention at that, and this may have been worsening overall. And also the social determinants of health, because this shows and becomes clearer and clearer that if we don't look at the social aspects of the person is in society, we will not be able to address that. We have huge, gigantic challenges in our country with huge inequality. management challenges, how to allocate resources. Today, 9% of the GDP is invested in healthcare, but a population that is getting older, an aging population, 9% of the GDP, but only 25% have access to supplemental health. And when we look at the expenditure, 9%, 50% is spent in supplemental health, and 50% is spent with public health. And those 50% need to provide care to 65% of the population. So actually, there is a major imbalance, and undoubtedly, health is still very much focused on disease. So more and more, we have the challenge of promoting prevention, of promoting a vision of integral health, that all aspects of health are considered physical, mental, and social, and that we could effectively use resources appropriately. Apart from that, how can we have this approach of looking into diversity? And I think Luana mentioned a very important aspect, that many trials do not include enough women or Black persons in a trial. I'm going to mention just one brief example. Cardiovascular disease is the main cause of death amongst women. Until recently, all the studies did not have that line, because women were underrepresented in clinical trials. So Luana is asking, are the Black appropriately represented in epidemiological trials? No, they're not. So this is an aspect that needs to be more and more considered, so that we may stratify risk appropriately. So there are many aspects and many challenges for us to mention, and access to good quality health should be mentioned as a very relevant theme all over our country. And this is another super important challenge, where we're discussing diversity, inclusion, and health. And I would just like to reinforce what Sergio said. It's no good to just talk about physical health, so treating a disease. Financial health is a fundamental aspect, because the social determinant of disease is much more important than studies used to focus on, because they had, those analyses were biased, and those biases were not appropriately addressed. So Ricardo, very briefly, I would like to mention that, to say that, and I know that we are out of time, but it was very nice to have this conversation here. Thank you very much. Jeane, thank you very much. We all agree with this dynamic, something that we need to review to improve access. I have been talking a lot to José Villar, the founder of FIS. He always says a keyword: access, access to good quality education, to good quality healthcare, access to credit, as Sergio mentioned. So all of this impacts on the quality. And with this summary, the connection that you have with all these words here, with Ricardo, Luana, Sergio, you, I think that now we are closing our panel, very well structured. You have all provided very valuable contribution, and I think these contributions will be on the FIS records, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that we can meet again very soon. Thinking of our tomorrows, you're all invited to come and visit the museum and to create a dialogue with us. So please feel free. It will be a pleasure to have you here at the museum. Jeane, Luana, Ricardo, and Sergio, thank you very much. And let us pursue better tomorrows. Thank you very much.